So I'm joined now in studio by Dr. Ron Watermeyer, a civil engineer and director of Infrastructure Options. Good afternoon, Doc. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I know we're being urged not to speculate, you know, but I found it rather, shall we say, curious that the company that was involved in the construction of this building is refusing to cooperate with the authorities.
Look, I think there's different reactions that people would have in a horrific event like this, and it's up to them to stand up, because at the end of the day, it's going to be found that there's a number of people in the supply chain that could have contributed to this disaster. Whenever you have a disaster, it's usually more than two fatal flaws, a lot of contributing factors, and I think people just run to ground.
So it's not unusual in situations like these for a construction company, in this instance, to
the pressure
hold
comes
back, if we're putting it mildly, and we're being cautious.
While they assess and cautious, one would hope that they would come out and assist with, you know, those that are bereaved, those that are looking for lost ones, and things like that.
Of course, I mean, the Minister of Labour arrived there today, just like 3 days after of course, the provincial government has been at work, so the rescue workers and everybody who's been there, including your NGOs, I know, like your gift of the givers. But what does the law say in situations like these? What happens? What happens when something like this, a disaster like this, strikes?
Well, we do have laws in the country in terms around planning for the building, getting planning permission. So there's going to building control, having your plans passed, putting your professional team in place. Like, obviously this has got a structural issue to it. In the collapse, there would have been a person responsible for the structural engineering. So that would have been the first port of call. It is a residential development, as I understand. There would have been registration with the National Home Builders Registration Council, and then what kicks in is your occupational health and safety, the construction regulations, so that before you got a permit to start construction, that would have gone to the Department of Labour with the health and safety plan and obtained permission to start construction. So we've got some of the checks and balances in place, but from there onwards, things can happen.
You're right, and that's what I would have thought. That, you know, that first you would have called, someone would have gone and said, you know, did someone have the permission to be, were the plans approved, and so on and forth and so forth. And while this building was being constructed, were the safety and, you know, other regulations observed and so on and so forth. I don't think we should be as blank, you know, as we are.
That is the ticking of the boxes. Remember, people build buildings.
Yes.
People design it. So it comes down to the competence of the people that are involved in how to handle the situation, from the management of the developer, the engineering technical people that are there, the contractors, how you respond to the issues. Because obviously something major has gone wrong, something that is unforeseen. This should never have happened, but it has happened.
Do we have the kinds of systems in place that ensure that in the event this unfortunate, an unfortunate incident like this one happens, then the systems are agile enough to take us beyond the box-ticking exercise?
Well, I think the thing is it after the fact or before the fact? Do you want to prevent something like this, or do we react to it afterwards? I think the staff that have been reacting to it, it's been something quite unprecedented at this sort of scale, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. But I think we can do more on prevention. And in fact, it's not uncommon. For example, if you remember in 2017 in the UK, the Grenfell Towers burned down, 70 plus dead. What responded there was government looked into it, and the findings of Dame Hackett's commission was that competence was patchy amongst both contractors, designers, and so the whole emphasis in the UK has been, rather than tightening rules and regulations, start looking at the competence of those that put up high-rise buildings or buildings of this nature.
I mean, there's a Rport building collapse that you once wrote about. There anything that you are able to pick up, from there that could well apply to, without prejudging what has happened in George?
Yeah, look, I think the thing is the Rport collapse was a 3-story building that collapsed in 2008. One of the difficulties that everybody lashes out with the public, it's right in the public eye. One wants answers. Why did this happen? How did it happen? But I mean, before you can assess that, you've got to move this whole mountain of rubble. In that particular instance, only half the building collapsed, the other half stayed. Regrettably, there were 2 lives lost and 14 injured. But what happened is, instead of having to wait for investigations to try and establish the cause, I'm a structural engineer. I've been involved with the Southern African region of Institution of Structural Engineers for many years. And we looked at it because someone published photographs on the internet. It was on a smoker's balcony right on the line of where the collapse came, and they thought it would be a lovely idea to hand over an album of all the photographs from the day that they started excavation, and it went right up to the collapse. So we could figure out from photos, with nothing sub judice, from public domain information, whereas if you look at this, there's nothing you can gain from public domain information. What I have found in all the structural failures that we've got, and I think the lessons we've learned, a large part of it is about 2/3 of the problem relies on the design side, where not necessarily that a designer is incompetent, but a designer may underestimate the influence or model something that is not actually built in practice. Then you've still got 1/3 on the construction side that there might be issues around the quality and things like that. In the Rport case, at least, what happened there was just negligence and incompetence was the issue. But
on the part of a construction company?
No, on the part of the designer. The construction company was exonerated in the end when I saw the final reports and things like that. They had followed to the letter. They had appointed someone in good faith who never performed, and they lost a lot in that, not just human life, but there was also the financial side. So I think one of the problems, what we learned from that particular circumstance, and I think it's still a prevalent problem today, how do you recognize who is competent to build, to be your builder, and who is competent to be your designer?
Does the system not take care of that? In other words, you have to be registered with a particular body. That body must check whether, you meet all the set criteria, assuming there is.
Yes, we do have the Engineering Council, for example. If I just stick to the engineering side, we have an Architectural Council and so on. So the built environment professions are regulated. But remember that the registration takes place at a point of entry to the profession. So the model we have is point of entry to the profession, then you rely on professional, that you abide by a code of conduct. Now, the problem is, if you don't know what you don't know, you might solve the wrong problem correctly, but you've missed what the real issue is. So what is happening is, it's the same as like the medical profession. If you go to have an operation, you want to go to a specialist. He has been credentialed. He's not just a general doctor. He has presented his credentials and has been recognized as operating at that level of competency. So I think one of the issues that we've got is our regulations at the moment work that you have to be professionally registered. Fine, no problem with that. If everyone abided by the codes of conduct, and if they knew what they didn't know and had been assessed against that, maybe we could solve a lot of these problems.
Is there no way of saying, when you move from this category to another, where you build bigger and more complicated buildings, then you have to attain a certain level of competency? Or maybe a different way of asking this is, how do other jurisdictions that are managing these things better than us, what do they do?
Well, for example, we have in the Engineering Council, you can have a civil engineering degree and you can register as a professional engineer. Now, civil engineering covers a very wide range of things from roads, water, structures, the whole lot. It's not specifically you've been tested against your competency to design structures. If, for example, you go to the Institution of Structural Engineers, which is an international organisation based in the UK, operates under the Engineering Council UK, you write an examination in structures, you tested in the area that you're going to practice. United States is the same. Many places in Asia is exactly the same. And the point you make about the more risky buildings, it's now coming in following the Grenfell disaster, that now if you're going to design high-rise building, it's not just the general structural engineer, you now have to pass an additional examination to operate at that level. So it all comes down to competence of people and how do you establish competence. And I think this is the problem we sit with tendering system in government. How do you know that you're appointing someone that is very competent? If you go into the medical profession, you know that they've gone through a very rigorous process, both practical and experiential, to specialize that you would get a specialist in. We are still at the level of a generalist and not differentiating.
Dr. Watermeyer, let's leave it there for today. Thank you very much for your insights and your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.